Getty's plan has been deemed unworkably. Customs partnership is being considered by the Prime Minister along with a maximum facilitation solution. Boris Johnson and HMRC have both previously rubbished Mrs May's preferred border option, and now the UK in a changing Europe has slapped down the Tory leader. Thomas Sampson, who is also professor at the London School of Economics, described the plan as being like a house of cards that comes falling down while ripping apart the negotiating position. Talking about the idea with journalists, including Express.co.uk, he said, "The idea is that in order to avoid the kind of border frictions that leaving the EU would create, the UK would replicate the EU's external border." He added, "Let's take sugar as an example, and let's suppose the UK reduces the protection on sugar below EU levels. By importing sugar into the UK, I would pay the EU tariff. If I could then prove that the sugar I imported, instead of being destined for EU markets, was only used in the UK, the firm could then apply to get a rebate of the difference between the EU tariff level and the UK tariff level." However, despite the good intentions of the position, the suggestion is seen as unworkable. Explaining the difficulties in implementing the idea, Mr. Sampson continued, "Suppose the sugar is imported and it's then used by another producer for some kind of confectionery. Now, if that confectionery is sold in the UK, they can potentially get the rebate on the tariff. If it's sold in the EU, they can't. But suppose that confectionery producer sells the product to another UK firm, which then makes another good which is sold to the EU." Earlier this month, The Telegraph reported officials from HM Revenue and Customs believe Mrs May's hopes for a post-Brexit customs partnership were unviable. A Whitehall source said, "HMRC dislikes the customs partnership. They don't think it's a viable option. They think it's for the birds. It's incredibly complicated and would be very hard to track goods." When it was originally put forward, officials assumed that MaxFac would be the primary option. When they heard it was the customs partnership, they thought, "You're having a laugh." The maximum facilitation option would see the government use technology and a trusted trader scheme to allow the goods to cross the Ireland border with minimal disruption. Getty. Boris Johnson has labeled the customs partnership option as crazy. Theresa May is understood to prefer a customs partnership to maximum facilitation. It is supported by Brexiteer Cabinet Minister Boris Johnson, who has described Mrs May's customs partnership alternative as crazy. Agreeing with the Foreign Secretary's assessment, Mr. Sampson said, "You need to keep tracking all the way down the chain and checking it hasn't been sold in the EU to get the rebate. We don't have that kind of data, and collecting that data is probably going to be more cumbersome than any barter procedures. So when you start to think about how this idea would work, it's like a house of cards that all comes falling down." So, unfortunately, ideas on how to implement a customs partnership are really lacking.